The West did not fall to outlaws. It fell to the men hired to hunt them down, men who blurred the line between justice and murder so badly that history chose to forget most of their names. They rode into towns the law had already given up on. They tracked killers for money, not for badges. And when they caught them, nobody asked how clean the kill was. They only asked for proof. Today, that silence ends. This is the top 44 bounty hunters of the Old West. Uncensored. Welcome to historical lore. John Riley Duncan. He did not look like a man who hunted killers for a living. John Riley Duncan was a quiet Dallas police officer who turned into one of the most relentless bounty hunters in Texas. He hunted men because the law paid better than farming. His tracking methods relied purely on patience. He would sit for days outside a suspected hideout, blending in with the locals until the perfect moment to strike presented itself. His most dangerous pursuit involved the notorious gunfighter John Wesley Hardin. Duncan knew Hardin was hiding in Florida under a fake name. Instead of kicking down doors, Duncan went undercover. He disguised himself as a wandering laborer. He tracked Hardin through swamps and dusty towns until he finally cornered him in Pensacola. The reward was a massive $4,000. The actual capture was a masterpiece of tension. Duncan and a fellow lawman cornered Hardin in a smoking car of a passenger train. When Hardin realized he was trapped, he desperately reached for his famous revolver, but his gun caught on his own suspenders. Duncan lunged forward, using his raw physical strength to wrestle the deadly outlaw to the floor before a single shot could be fired. Hardin later admitted he had been completely outsmarted. Duncan preferred a simple double-barreled shotgun. It was messy but effective. His frontier survival skills involved blending in perfectly with local drifters. Criminals rarely knew Duncan was hunting them until they were staring down his barrels. The sheer logistics of the journey back to Texas proved just as dangerous as the capture itself. Duncan had to transport his highly dangerous prisoner across multiple state lines while dodging sympathizers who wanted to break Hardin free. Duncan remained awake for days, keeping his weapon drawn the entire train ride. He survived his wild years and eventually retired in peace, living a quiet life after capturing one of the deadliest men in Texas. It took a monster to catch a monster. If you're hooked on these real-life legends, drop the word tracker in the comments. James B. Hume. He did not carry a badge for the government. James B. Hume was a private detective for Wells Fargo. He became a manhunter to protect corporate gold. Hume was cold, calculating, and obsessed with details. While other men looked for footprints, Hume looked at bullet trajectories and horseshoe brands. He operated like a modern forensic scientist living in the 19th century. His most famous target was the poet-robber Black Bart. Black Bart left mocking poems at the scenes of his stagecoach robberies. Hume hunted him for years, frustrated by the phantom thief who never fired a weapon and always walked away on foot. He finally tracked him down using a single laundry mark on a dropped handkerchief. The reward was substantial, but Hume cared more about solving the puzzle. The story of the handkerchief is legendary. After Bart fled a botched robbery, Hume found the cloth left behind in the dirt. It had a tiny laundry mark reading FX07. Hume sent his agents to visit over 90 different laundry services in San Francisco. They finally found the shop that used that specific mark, which led them directly to a mild-mannered gentleman named Charles Bowles. Bowles was stunned when Hume knocked on his door. He preferred a Colt revolver but rarely used it. His true weapon was his mind. He kept meticulous files on every criminal in California. Outlaws feared his memory more than his gun. Following the stunning arrest, Hume did not seek the spotlight or demand public glory. He quietly gathered all the physical evidence and presented an airtight case in court. Black Bart was sent to prison, and Hume immediately returned to his dusty office. He spent the next 20 years revolutionizing how stagecoach guards secured their valuable cargo. If Hume was on your trail, you could run, but you could never hide. He died of natural causes, leaving behind a legacy of brilliant detective work. Ben Daniels. Ben Daniels was a buffalo hunter who found hunting men to be much more profitable. He was a massive man with a terrifying scowl. Daniels tracked his prey by understanding the land. He knew where every watering hole was located in the Kansas plains. He understood that a desperate outlaw would always make mistakes when they ran out of water. He famously pursued the Dodge City gang. Daniels rode through a blinding blizzard to catch horse thieves who thought the weather would protect them. The reward was just $50 a head. For Daniels, it was about the thrill of the chase. One of his most incredible stories involved hunting a murderer into the desolate Indian Territory. Daniels tracked the killer for 3 weeks, surviving on nothing but prairie dog meat and muddy water. When he finally found the man sleeping by a small fire, Daniels did not wake him. He simply sat on a rock nearby, rifle aimed, and waited 4 hours for the sun to rise and the man to open his eyes. The killer surrendered instantly. He carried a Sharps buffalo rifle. He could hit a man from 1,000 yards away. His strange habit was chewing on raw coffee beans while tracking. Criminals dreaded the sound of his heavy boots. During his later years, his incredible reputation caught the eye of the president himself. Theodore Roosevelt appointed Daniels as the United States Marshal for the Arizona Territory, knowing his brutal past was exactly what the frontier needed. Daniels spent his final days taming the wild desert towns, utilizing the exact same tracking skills he had perfected on the frozen plains. Daniels survived well into the modern era as a highly respected lawman. Harry Morse. Harry Morse was a dedicated sheriff who doubled as a fierce bounty hunter in California. He was polite, well-dressed, and absolutely lethal. Morse hunted men to bring order to a chaotic gold rush society. He tracked outlaws by interviewing terrified locals and piecing together rumors across massive mountainous counties. His legendary pursuit of the bandit Juan Soto ended in a brutal shootout. Morse tracked Soto to a remote canyon hideout in the Diablo Range. The bounty was set at several $1,000s. Morse armed himself with a Henry repeating rifle. He was a master of mountain survival, able to navigate steep cliffs in total darkness without making a sound. The showdown with Soto is still studied by historians. Morse disguised himself and walked right into Soto's heavily armed camp. When Soto recognized him, he drew his revolvers. Morse drew his own gun and a desperate gunfight erupted. Soto burst through a doorway, firing blindly. Morse calmly raised his Henry rifle, tracked Soto moving through the brush, and dropped him with a single shot to the head from over 100 yards away. Morse had a reputation for giving men one chance to surrender. If they refused, he did not miss. Outlaws learned to drop their guns when they saw his tailored suit approaching. His ability to ride a horse through narrow rocky passes at full speed made him virtually impossible to escape in the high country. He memorized every single hidden trail and abandoned mining camp in his jurisdiction, ensuring outlaws had nowhere safe to rest. Morse survived his dangerous career and became a successful private detective in San Francisco. Luke Short. Luke Short was a gambler, a gunfighter, and occasionally a manhunter when the price was right. He was short, impeccably dressed, and possessed a hair-trigger temper. Short hunted men who owed him money or who crossed his powerful friends. He considered bounty hunting to be just another high-stakes game. His tracking methods involved the saloon underground. He listened to drunk cowboys and bribed bartenders. Short famously helped run the Dodge City Peace Commission to hunt down corrupt officials and thieves. The reward was political control and a cut of the local gambling profits. He did not chase men through the desert. He waited for them to walk into a bar. One of his most famous encounters involved a corrupt fort commander named Charlie Storms. Storms was a notorious killer who thought he could intimidate the smaller gambler. Storms cornered Short in the street and drew his gun. Short was incredibly fast. Before Storms could even level his weapon, Short drew his pistol and fired a shot directly into Storms' heart. The larger man fell dead instantly. He preferred a custom Colt Peacemaker. His survival skill was his fast draw and total lack of hesitation. Short had a strange habit of buying his targets a drink before shooting them if they resisted. Feared for his sudden violence, criminals usually left town when Short arrived. He was so heavily connected that whenever local politicians tried to run him out of town, Short would simply summon heavily armed friends like Wyatt Earp to back him up. He turned entire towns into his own personal fortresses. He died peacefully in bed, a rare fate for a frontier gunfighter. Charlie Bassett. Charlie Bassett was one of the original Dodge City lawmen. He hunted men because he believed in absolute order. Bassett was a silent, brooding figure. He tracked outlaws by studying their horses. He could tell how tired a gang was by the depth of their hoofprints in the Kansas dust. He knew exactly when to push his own horse and when to rest. His most dangerous pursuit was chasing the Sam Bass gang through Indian territory. The reward was a few $100s, but the danger was extreme. Bassett carried a Winchester rifle and a massive hunting knife. He could survive for weeks eating nothing but dried jerky and rainwater. During the pursuit of the Bass gang, Bassett and his posse were pinned down in a narrow ravine by heavy rifle fire. The outlaws thought they had the lawmen trapped. Instead of retreating, Bassett ordered his men to hold their fire. He waited until the outlaws ran low on ammunition and broke from cover. Bassett then stood up and delivered such accurate suppressive fire that the entire gang was forced to abandon their stolen horses and flee on foot. His unique reputation was his utter lack of fear under direct fire. He once walked into a saloon full of hostile cowboys and arrested their leader without drawing a weapon. Outlaws respected Bassett, knowing he would kill them without hesitation if they fought back. He commanded immense respect from the most dangerous men in town, frequently using his massive physical presence to stop bar brawls before a single punch was thrown. His intense glare alone was often enough to disarm a drunk cowboy. He died quietly after years of service. El Fuego Baca. El Fuego Baca became a manhunter after seeing cowboys terrorize his community. He was fiercely proud, heavily armed, and impossible to intimidate. Baca did not track men through the wilderness. He waited for them in town and locked the doors behind them. He believed the law was meant to protect the innocent, and he would enforce it himself if necessary. His legendary stand in Frisco, New Mexico, is still talked about today. He arrested a drunk cowboy and then held off an entire mob of 80 angry cattlemen. They fired 4,000 rounds into his adobe house. The reward was his life. Baca fought back with 2 Colt revolvers. He survived by lying flat on a dirt floor while bullets destroyed the walls. The story of the siege is unbelievable. For 36 straight hours, the cowboys blasted the small house with rifles and dynamite. They even collapsed the roof. Throughout the ordeal, the attackers could smell cooking meat. Baca was calmly making himself beef stew on a small stove in the corner of the ruined house while returning fire. When the smoke finally cleared, Baca walked out completely unharmed, having killed 4 of his attackers. Baca had a strange habit of sending letters to outlaws, politely asking them to surrender or be killed. Amazingly, many surrendered. Criminals believed Baca was bulletproof. Following the massive gunfight, Baca actually stood trial for murder, but the jury acquitted him when they saw the bullet-riddled door of his house entered into evidence. The door had hundreds of holes in it, proving his claim of self-defense perfectly. He lived a long life, eventually becoming a prominent lawyer and a respected politician. Bat Masterson. Bat Masterson was a legend who hunted men for the thrill and the fame. He was charming, arrogant, and incredibly deadly. Masterson hunted fugitives across the Great Plains using a network of informants. He tracked men by reading telegraph messages and anticipating train routes, staying one step ahead of the fugitives. His pursuit of the outlaws who killed his brother Ed was cold and calculated. Masterson tracked them down one by one. The reward was pure vengeance. He carried a customized Colt revolver and famously used a heavy cane to beat criminals into submission. He preferred bruising a man over killing him, but he never hesitated to pull the trigger when necessary. One remarkable story involves Masterson hunting 2 train robbers in Colorado. He cornered them in a snowy canyon. The men thought they had the high ground and began firing down at him. Masterson calmly dismounted, pulled out a Sharps rifle, and began picking apart their cover piece by piece. He shot the rocks right next to their heads until they threw down their guns in sheer terror, begging him to stop. His frontier survival skills included an uncanny ability to read a man's eyes before a gunfight. Outlaws hated Masterson because he always made the newspapers. They knew a fight with him would end up on the front page. Later in life, Masterson actually moved to New York City and used his incredible fame to secure a job as a prominent sports writer. He spent his final years writing boxing columns, sharing his wild frontier stories with eager East Coast readers. He died at his desk, perfectly suited in a bowler hat. John Hughes. John Hughes was a Texas Ranger who hunted men like a ghost. He became a manhunter after outlaws stole his horses. Hughes was quiet, religious, and totally relentless. He tracked criminals by studying broken twigs and displaced rocks in the Texas desert. He could read the landscape like a printed book. His most dangerous hunt involved tracking the murderers of a fellow ranger. For months, he followed their trail across the desolate borderlands. The reward was a badge of honor. Hughes carried a Winchester rifle and a pair of Colt revolvers. He could survive in the deep desert by finding hidden water pockets in the rocks. The story of his vengeance for his fallen comrade is chilling. Hughes tracked the killers into a heavily guarded outlaw town near the Mexican border. Instead of bringing a large posse, Hughes rode in alone under the cover of a massive dust storm. He kicked down the door of the saloon where the killers were drinking. Before they could even stand up, Hughes opened fire, killing the main suspects instantly and arresting the rest. The town was so terrified they let him ride out with his prisoners. Hughes had a unique habit of reading poetry while waiting in ambush. Criminals were terrified of him because he never seemed to sleep. If Hughes was behind you, you were already caught. He developed strong relationships with local Native American scouts, learning their most closely guarded survival secrets for navigating the barren landscapes. These skills made him completely self-sufficient when tracking targets through harsh weather conditions. He served as a ranger for decades, his long career leaving him a haunted man in his final years. Charlie Siringo. Charlie Siringo was a cowboy who realized he was better at hunting rustlers than wrangling cows. He was charismatic, sneaky, and a master of disguise. Siringo joined the Pinkerton Detective Agency to hunt men across the entire West. He tracked targets by joining their gangs and learning their deepest secrets. His most dangerous pursuit was infiltrating the Wild Bunch. Siringo rode with outlaws for months, secretly gathering evidence. The reward was thousands of dollars in corporate bounty. He preferred a small pocket pistol because it was easy to hide. His survival skill was his silver tongue. He could talk his way out of a lynch mob. While riding undercover with a gang of rustlers, Siringo was almost discovered. The gang leader grew suspicious and accused Siringo of being a spy. They put a gun to his head and demanded he prove he was a real outlaw. Without missing a beat, Siringo offered to lead them on a raid against a local bank. He planned the entire robbery so convincingly that they backed down and apologized. Siringo then slipped away in the night and returned with a heavily armed posse to arrest them all. Siringo had a strange habit of keeping a diary even while sleeping in outlaw camps. Criminals never knew if their new best friend was actually Charlie Siringo. When he finally retired from hunting men, he decided to publish everything he knew about the Pinkertons. The agency, furious, sued him to block his books, resulting in a bitter legal battle that forced him to change all the names in his famous autobiography. He lived a long life, eventually becoming a popular author, Chris Madsen. Chris Madsen was a Danish immigrant who fought in European wars before coming to America. He became a manhunter because he loved combat. Madsen was disciplined, tough, and highly organized. He tracked outlaws using military tactics, flanking their camps and cutting off escape routes. He viewed every manhunt as a military campaign. As part of the legendary Three Guardsmen, Madsen hunted the Doolin Dalton gang. He tracked them through the freezing mud of Oklahoma Territory. The reward was substantial government bounty. Madsen carried a repeating shotgun. He was an expert at surviving brutal winter conditions, having learned in the freezing mud of European battlefields. One incredible story showcases his absolute fearlessness. Madsen once tracked a notorious killer to a small wooden shack deep in the Indian Territory. The killer barricaded the door and shouted that he had enough ammunition to fight for a week. Madsen did not argue. He simply grabbed a large stick of dynamite from his saddlebags, lit the fuse, and tossed it onto the roof. As the fuse burned down, the killer burst through the front door, screaming and begging to be arrested before the shack exploded. His reputation was one of absolute military precision. He treated a posse like an infantry unit. Outlaws knew they could not outmaneuver Madsen. His strict discipline extended to managing local jails, completely eliminating corruption wherever he was stationed. He kept flawless records of his captures and insisted his deputies maintain pristine uniforms even in the deepest wilderness. He outlived almost all the men he hunted, dying peacefully in his 90s. Heck Thomas. Heck Thomas was a Southern gentleman who became one of the most feared lawmen in the Indian Territory. He hunted men to bring justice to a lawless land. Thomas was polite but entirely ruthless. He tracked criminals by building networks of terrified informants who knew better than to lie to him. His most famous pursuit ended with the death of the outlaw Bill Doolin. Thomas tracked Doolin for years. He finally cornered him on a dark country road. The reward was a massive bounty on Doolin's head. Thomas carried a heavy shotgun loaded with buckshot. He could survive in the rugged hills by eating raw roots and wild game. The ambush of Bill Doolin is a legendary piece of frontier history. Thomas knew Doolin was visiting his wife in secret. He positioned his posse in the tall grass outside her home. When Doolin walked out under the moonlight, Thomas politely called out his name, giving the outlaw a chance to surrender. Doolin fired his rifle instead. Thomas responded instantly, blasting Doolin with a double charge of buckshot that ended the outlaw's career forever. He had a habit of addressing his targets with extreme politeness right before he shot them. Criminals feared Thomas because he never gave up. He would hunt a man for 5 years if necessary. Before becoming a lawman, Thomas actually worked as an express messenger on dangerous train routes in Texas. He once fought off a gang of train robbers by hiding the real cash and giving them packages stuffed with completely useless scrap paper. Thomas died peacefully, remembered as a titan of frontier justice. Thomas proved the law often had to be just as ruthless as the outlaws. Do you think his brutal methods were justified, or did he cross the line? Tell me your thoughts below. Bill Tilghman. William Wild Bill. Tilghman was the third member of the Three Guardsmen. He hunted men because he believed the West needed civilizing. Tilghman was calm, honest, and brave to a fault. He tracked outlaws by outriding them, exhausting their horses over hundreds of miles until they had nowhere left to run. His most dangerous hunt involved capturing the outlaw Bill Doolin alive. While others wanted Doolin dead for the bounty, Tilghman cornered him in a bathhouse and took him without firing a shot. The reward was immense public fame. Tilghman preferred a long-barreled Colt revolver. His survival skill was his deep knowledge of the Oklahoma terrain. The capture of Bill Doolin perfectly captures Tilghman's character. Tilghman walked into a public bathhouse in Eureka Springs and spotted Doolin sitting in a corner. Doolin reached for his gun, but Tilghman already had his revolver pointed straight at the outlaw's chest. Instead of shooting, Tilghman calmly talked to Doolin, convincing him that dying in a bathhouse was a terrible way for a legend to go out. Doolin surrendered quietly. He had a unique reputation for treating captured men with absolute respect. Criminals actually surrendered to Tilghman because they knew he would protect them from lynch mobs. In a surprising twist, Tilghman spent his later years writing and starring in his own silent movies to show audiences what the real Wild West actually looked like. Tragically, he was murdered by a corrupt prohibition officer in an Oklahoma oil town in his old age, Frank Canton. Frank Canton was a lawman who was secretly an outlaw himself. Born Joe Horner, he changed his name and became a hunter of men to hide from his own violent past. Canton was cold, secretive, and utterly lethal. He tracked criminals using inside knowledge of how outlaw gangs operated because he used to lead one. His most dangerous pursuit involved the Johnson County War in Wyoming. Canton acted as a mercenary manhunter for wealthy cattle barons. He hunted down alleged rustlers with brutal efficiency. The reward was a massive salary paid in gold. He carried a customized Winchester rifle and preferred to shoot from a distance, never giving his targets a fair fight. One terrifying incident involves Canton tracking a rival named John Tisdale. Canton waited in a freezing snowy ravine for 2 days, knowing Tisdale would ride past with his morning supplies. When Tisdale finally appeared, Canton shot him from ambush, executing him without a word. He then carefully brushed his own tracks away and vanished into the snow like a ghost. His survival skill was knowing how to blend into the shadows. Canton had a strange habit of never standing with his back to a door. Criminals hated and feared him because they sensed he was just like them, only with a badge. Escaping his bloody reputation in Wyoming, Canton later traveled all the way to Alaska during the gold rush to work as a federal marshal in absolute freezing wilderness. He died in a hotel room, taking many dark secrets to his grave. Tom Horn. Tom Horn was a scout, a tracker, and eventually a hired manhunter who crossed every moral line the frontier had left. He hunted men for money. Horn was solitary, intensely observant, and devoid of mercy. He learned to track from Apache scouts, able to read a single bent blade of grass in the deep desert. His most dangerous assignments involved hunting rustlers in Wyoming. Horn did not arrest men. He left them dead in the dirt with a rock placed under their head as a signature. The reward was $500 per target. He preferred a Winchester .30 rifle. His survival skills were unmatched. He could vanish into the mountains for months. Horn once tracked a notorious cattle thief for over 200 miles across the frozen high plains. He never built a fire, surviving entirely on dried meat to avoid being seen. When he finally caught up to the rustler, he shot him from nearly 500 yards away. The man never even heard the gunshot that killed him. Horn then walked down, placed his signature rock under the dead man's head, and walked away into the snow. Horn had a strange habit of bragging about his kills when he was drunk. Criminals were utterly terrified of him. If Tom Horn was hired, you were already a dead man. While sitting in jail awaiting his execution, Horn actually braided the very rope the sheriff used to hang him, treating his final moments with total indifference. His loose lips eventually got him hanged for the murder of a teenage boy, Pat Garrett. Pat Garrett became a manhunter by accident, elected to clean up a bloody county in New Mexico. He was tall, soft-spoken, and fiercely determined. Garrett tracked men by systematically cutting off their support networks, threatening anyone who offered them food or shelter. He starved outlaws out of their hiding spots. His pursuit of Billy the Kid made him a legend. Garrett hunted Billy through freezing snow and dusty towns for months. The reward was $500. Garrett carried a Colt revolver and a double-barreled shotgun. He survived by riding through the night, sleeping in the saddle to gain ground on his targets. The story of Garrett tracking Billy to the Stinking Springs hideout is brutal. Garrett and his posse surrounded the stone house in the freezing cold. When one of Billy's men stepped outside to feed the horses, Garrett shot him instantly, thinking it was the kid. The man crawled back inside to die. Garrett then shot the horses tied to the building to trap the gang completely. After a long siege in the freezing snow, the starving outlaws finally surrendered. He had a reputation for setting up deadly ambushes. He did not believe in fair fights. Criminals knew Garrett would shoot from the dark if it meant winning. To cash in on his massive fame, Garrett co-authored a highly sensationalized biography about Billy the Kid, effectively creating the legendary status of the very man he killed. His fame brought him nothing but trouble, and he was eventually murdered in a roadside dispute. Bud Ledbetter. Bud Ledbetter was a fearless deputy marshal in the Indian Territory. He hunted men because he loved the smell of gunpowder. Ledbetter was massive, loud, and incredibly violent. He tracked criminals by brute force, riding into hostile towns and demanding answers while gripping the handle of his weapon. His most dangerous pursuit involved hunting train robbers through the dense woods of Oklahoma. When a gang tried to ambush a train, Ledbetter stepped out of the baggage car with a shotgun and ended the fight in seconds. The reward was steady, government pay. He preferred a short-barreled shotgun. One legendary story involves Ledbetter facing down an entire gang of bootleggers. They had holed up in an illegal saloon and promised to kill the first lawman who walked through the door. Ledbetter did not walk through the door. He hitched a team of horses to the wooden pillars holding up the front porch and tore the entire front of the building completely off. As the roof collapsed on the terrified criminals, Ledbetter stood in the dust cloud laughing out loud, his shotgun ready. Ledbetter had a strange habit of laughing loudly during gunfights. He survived by simply being tougher than anyone else on the frontier. Criminals were terrified of his physical strength and his total disregard for danger. After retiring from federal service, he became the beloved police chief of a rapidly growing Oklahoma City, proving he could manage a modern town as effectively as a wild frontier. Ledbetter retired as a legend and died of natural causes. Seth Bullock. Seth Bullock was a hardware store owner who became a relentless manhunter in Deadwood. He hunted men to protect his business interests. Bullock was intense, unsmiling, and possessed a piercing stare. He tracked criminals by organizing massive civilian possessions and flooding the wilderness with armed men. He believed in overwhelming force. His pursuit of horse thieves across the Dakota Plains was legendary. Bullock chased a gang for 2 weeks through hostile Indian territory. The reward was stolen property and local respect. He carried a pair of Colt revolvers. His survival skill was his natural leadership. Men followed him willingly into absolute danger. Bullock famously arrested an outlaw right in the middle of a crowded saloon. The man was a known killer who boasted that no sheriff could take him alive. Bullock walked up to his table, locked eyes with the man, and stared at him without saying a single word. The silence stretched for minutes. The pressure became so intense that the killer finally broke into a cold sweat, pushed his guns across the table, and surrendered, utterly defeated by a simple stare. Bullock had a unique habit of staring men down until they broke. Criminals were unnerved by his silent, burning gaze. His leadership in Deadwood brought him immense wealth, allowing him to build a luxurious hotel that still stands today. He eventually served as a captain during the Spanish-American War, remaining a lifelong confidant of Theodore Roosevelt. He helped bring civilization to the Black Hills. Joe Leffers. Joe Leffers was a Wyoming range detective who hunted the most dangerous men on the plains. He became a manhunter after realizing he was a gifted tracker. Leffers was patient, sly, and brilliant at interrogations. He tracked men by reading the ashes of their campfires. He could tell how long ago a fire burned by the temperature of the dirt. His most dangerous pursuit was the hunt for the Wild Bunch. Leffers tracked Butch Cassidy's gang across hundreds of miles of rocky terrain. The reward was thousands of dollars in railroad bounty. He carried a Winchester rifle. He survived by carrying extra horses to maintain a relentless pace, never letting the fugitives rest. His most famous success wasn't in the wilderness, but in a small office. Leffers knew he could never outshoot the deadly assassin Tom Horn, so he outsmarted him instead. He invited Horn to a meeting, brought out a bottle of whiskey, and started swapping war stories. Leffers slowly manipulated the conversation until a drunken Horn began bragging about his murders. Hidden behind a door, a stenographer wrote down every single word. Leffers then arrested him without firing a shot. His strange habit was tricking outlaws into confessing. Outlaws feared his mind more than his gun. He frequently acted as a direct agent for the massive cattle barons, locating hundreds of stolen cows hidden in remote box canyons where no other lawman dared to look. He lived to write a famous autobiography detailing all his incredible cases. Bill McDonald. Bill McDonald was a Texas Ranger who believed in fighting fire with absolute firepower. He hunted men to clean up the lawless border towns. McDonald was fearless, aggressive, and highly quotable. He tracked criminals by following their blood trails through the thick mesquite brush. His most dangerous pursuit involved stopping an entire riot in a Texas town. He arrived alone. The reward was his legendary status. McDonald carried a Winchester rifle and a Colt revolver. His survival skill was his overwhelming aggression. He charged into danger before his enemies could react. The story of the riot defines his entire legacy. The mayor of a small Texas town sent a desperate telegram for an entire company of Rangers to stop a bloody gang war. When the train arrived, only McDonald stepped off. The terrified mayor asked where the rest of the Rangers were. McDonald coldly replied that there was only one riot, so they only needed one Ranger. He then walked straight into the angry mob with his rifle raised and single-handedly forced everyone to go home. He had a unique habit of telling criminals they were already dead if they twitched. Outlaws were horrified by his reckless courage. His famous motto was that no man in the wrong can stand up against a fellow that is in the right and keeps on coming. Later in his life, McDonald actually served as a personal bodyguard for President Woodrow Wilson, taking his fierce protective instincts straight to the White House. He died of pneumonia in old age. John B. Jones. John B. Jones was the commander of the Frontier Battalion of the Texas Rangers. He hunted men to protect the fragile Texas settlements. Jones was a brilliant strategist, deeply educated, and strictly disciplined. He tracked outlaws and raiders by mapping out their raiding routes and setting massive traps. He treated frontier justice like a chess match. His pursuit of the Sam Bass gang ended in the famous shootout at Round Rock. Jones anticipated the gang's target and had his rangers waiting in the streets. The reward was a massive state bounty. He preferred military-style rifles. His survival skill was his logistical genius, ensuring his men always had water and ammunition in the desert. The trap at Round Rock was perfectly executed. Jones figured out that Bass was planning to rob the local bank by studying the gang's previous escape routes. He quietly slipped several undercover rangers into the town days before the robbery. When Bass and his men walked into the street to scout the bank, the rangers opened fire from the surrounding buildings. Bass was mortally wounded, completely outmaneuvered by a man who wasn't even on the street. He had a strange habit of writing detailed reports by campfire light. Criminals could not outsmart his well-placed ambushes. Beyond his tactical genius, Jones was a master diplomat who frequently negotiated peace treaties with rival political factions in Texas. He heavily relied on his high-ranking Masonic connections to smooth over bitter regional disputes across the state. Jones died young of illness, but he completely transformed the Texas Rangers into a modern manhunting force. Leander McNelly. Leander McNelly was a sickly man who led the most ruthless manhunting unit in Texas history. He hunted men to crush the violent bandit rings on the Mexican border. McNelly was quiet, physically weak, but possessed a terrifying will. He tracked criminals by terrorizing their informants until they begged to tell him the truth. His most dangerous pursuit involved illegally crossing the international border to retrieve stolen cattle. His rangers fought a pitched battle against an entire Mexican militia. The reward was securing the border. He carried a Colt revolver, but rarely fired it, letting his men do the killing. His survival skill was pure adrenaline. He commanded men from a cot when he was too sick to stand. During one brutal campaign, McNelly's men captured a group of armed bandits. McNelly ordered his men to dig a massive grave. He then lined the bandits up by the edge of the pit and told them they could either reveal the location of their leader or they would all go into the dirt. They confessed immediately. McNelly was utterly terrifying because he operated completely outside the law. He had a dark reputation for executing prisoners without trial. Criminals were utterly terrified of McNelly's Rangers, calling them a death squad. Raised in Washington County, he showed fierce loyalty to his men, often defending them against politicians who wanted the Ranger Company completely disbanded due to their savage tactics. He died of tuberculosis at only 33. Leaving behind a bloody and controversial legacy. James McParland. James McParland was a Pinkerton detective who hunted men by destroying them from the inside. He became a manhunter for the massive corporate salaries. McParland was Irish, charismatic, and a brilliant actor. He tracked criminals by drinking with them in underground taverns until they treated him like family. His most famous pursuit was infiltrating the Molly Maguires. He lived among the secret society of assassins for years. The reward was immense wealth and prestige. McParland carried a hidden derringer. His survival skill was his flawless memory, ensuring his fake cover stories never contradicted themselves. The story of his undercover work is incredibly tense. McParland had to actively participate in the planning of murders to maintain his cover as a loyal member of the secret society. He would secretly tip off the local police to save the victims at the last second, all while pretending to be furious that their plans kept failing. He survived on sheer nerve, knowing a single slip of the tongue would result in a brutal execution. He had a strange habit of staying perfectly sober while pretending to be blackout drunk. Criminals had no idea the man buying them whiskey was sending daily reports to the police. Following this success, McParland relocated to Denver, where he orchestrated massive crackdowns against violent labor unions and organized corporate espionage across the western states. McParland's testimony sent dozens of men to the gallows. He became a high-ranking Pinkerton executive and died rich. Burton Mossman. Burton Mossman was a cattleman who became the first captain of the Arizona Rangers. He hunted men to stop the massive rustling rings destroying the territory. Mossman was wealthy, tough, and fiercely independent. He tracked outlaws across the burning Arizona deserts by riding fast and light, leaving his supply wagons behind to catch his targets. His most dangerous pursuit was capturing the ruthless border bandit Agustin Chacon. Mossman crossed into Mexico alone. He tricked Chacon into a fake horse-stealing partnership before throwing him in irons. The reward was legendary fame in Arizona. He carried a heavy Winchester rifle. His survival skill was enduring extreme desert heat with almost no water. The capture of Chacon was incredibly daring. Mossman rode into the outlaws' camp pretending to be a fugitive on the run. He sat around a campfire with Chacon, drinking and sharing stories for 2 entire days. On the 3rd night, when Chacon finally let his guard down to light a cigarette, Mossman shoved a pistol directly into the outlaw's neck, slapped handcuffs on him, and dragged him back across the border before the rest of the gang knew what happened. Mossman had a unique habit of paying informants out of his own pocket. Criminals were stunned by his daring raids. Mossman also had a theatrical side, often wearing elaborate Mexican sombreros and silver-studded jackets during his undercover operations. His ability to perfectly mimic regional dialects made him entirely believable as a rogue vaquero. After resigning shortly after capturing Chacon, he managed massive ranches across the Southwest, using his immense wealth to fund local schools, completely transforming from a ruthless manhunter into a beloved philanthropist. Dave Cook. Dave Cook was the head of the Rocky Mountain Detective Association. He hunted men because law enforcement in Colorado was virtually non-existent. Cook was sharp, diplomatic, and highly connected. He tracked criminals by building a massive network of secret agents across several states. His most dangerous pursuit involved hunting down a gang of stagecoach robbers through the freezing Rocky Mountains. He trapped them in a narrow mountain pass. The reward was several $1,000s in gold. Cook preferred a reliable Colt revolver. His survival skill was his ability to navigate treacherous mountain terrain during deadly snowstorms. One of Cook's most brilliant captures involved a notorious murderer who fled to a mining camp. Cook knew he could not send a uniformed officer into the camp without causing a riot. Instead, he sent an agent disguised as a wealthy prospector. The agent befriended the killer, got him incredibly drunk, and convinced him they should travel to a neighboring town for better whiskey. The moment they crossed the county line, Cook was waiting with a shotgun and a set of irons. He had a strange habit of publishing the names of wanted men in his own private newspaper. Criminals feared Cook because his network was invisible. He also masterminded the capture of the notorious Musgrove gang by intercepting their mail. Cook realized the outlaws were writing to their sweethearts, so he staked out the local post office for weeks. When a gang member finally showed up for a letter, Cook's agents followed him straight to their hidden stronghold, capturing the entire crew without firing a single shot. He lived a long life and wrote a famous book on frontier detective work. John Armstrong. John Armstrong was a Texas Ranger who hunted the deadliest gunmen in the state. He became a manhunter to enforce the law with absolute prejudice. Armstrong was a towering man with a thick beard and a fierce temper. He tracked outlaws by physically beating the truth out of their associates. His legendary pursuit of the deadly gunfighter John Wesley Hardin is a masterpiece of frontier tracking. Armstrong chased Hardin all the way to Florida. He cornered Hardin on a moving train. The reward was a massive $4,000 bounty. Armstrong carried a long Colt revolver. His survival skill was his incredible physical strength, able to wrestle armed men to the ground. During the train capture, Armstrong literally leaped over the train seats to reach Hardin. One of Hardin's gang members drew a gun, but Armstrong pulled his own pistol and shot the man dead instantly. He then grabbed Hardin by the throat and beat him unconscious with the heavy barrel of his revolver. The sheer violence of the assault left the other passengers in total shock. He had a unique habit of using his heavy cane to knock men unconscious. Outlaws knew Armstrong would never stop chasing them, no matter how far they ran. Despite his ferocious reputation, Armstrong was a deeply devoted family man who wrote tender letters to his wife even while hunting killers. After his violent career ended, he founded a massive cattle ranch in southern Texas, which grew into one of the largest agricultural empires in the state. Today, the town of Armstrong, Texas, still bears the name of the unstoppable ranger, Nat Champion. Nat Champion was a small-time rancher who became a manhunter out of pure survival. He hunted the wealthy cattle barons' hired assassins who were terrorizing Wyoming. Champion was brave, stubborn, and incredibly accurate with a rifle. He tracked the movements of corporate hitmen to protect his friends. His most dangerous pursuit turned into a desperate last stand. During the Johnson County War, 50 hired killers surrounded his small cabin. The reward for his death was thousands of dollars. Champion fought them off alone for an entire day with a Winchester rifle. His survival skill was his incredible calm under fire. The story of his death is one of the most heroic in Western history. Trapped inside the burning cabin, Champion grabbed a small notebook. While bullets tore through the walls and smoke filled the room, he calmly wrote down the details of the attack, describing the assassins outside. His final entry noted that the roof was on fire and it was time to run. He burst through the front door, guns blazing, and was shot down. His diary survived. He had a tragic habit of keeping a diary as bullets tore through his walls. The assassins who killed him were eventually surrounded by a massive posse of over 200 furious citizens, proving that Champion's sacrifice had successfully galvanized the entire region against corporate tyranny. The blood-stained diary he kept during his final moments was later read aloud in court, securing his legacy as the ultimate martyr of the open range and changing Wyoming law forever. Bob Paul. Bob Paul was a massive, terrifying lawman who hunted stagecoach robbers across the Southwest. He became a manhunter because his sheer size made him a natural enforcer. Paul was 6'6", weighing over 250 pounds. He tracked criminals by organizing massive, heavily armed posses. His most dangerous pursuit involved riding shotgun for Wells Fargo during an infamous robbery attempt near Tombstone. When armed men stepped into the road, Paul roared at them and opened fire with his shotgun. The reward was keeping the silver safe. He preferred a 10-gauge double-barreled shotgun. His survival skill was his raw physical intimidation. The attempted robbery is legendary. Armed men suddenly blocked the stagecoach path. The driver froze in terror, but Bob Paul simply stood up on the bouncing coach, roared like a grizzly bear, and unloaded his massive shotgun into the darkness. A fierce firefight broke out. Paul actually took the reins from the terrified driver while still returning fire, driving the stagecoach right through the ambush and saving the entire payload. He had a strange habit of laughing during gun battles. Outlaws were terrified of Paul. Bullets seemed to miss his massive frame. Paul was also surprisingly light on his feet for a giant. He once chased a fleeing train robber into a dark alleyway and actually vaulted over a wooden fence to cut the man off. His immense popularity eventually led him to run for Pima County Sheriff against powerful political machines. He won, proving that the frontier preferred raw, honest strength over corrupt politicians. He died peacefully after a lifetime of extreme violence. William Pinkerton. William Pinkerton was the heir to the most famous detective agency in the world. He hunted men to expand his family's corporate empire. Pinkerton was sophisticated, ruthless, and brilliant. He tracked outlaws not by riding a horse, but by deploying armies of undercover operatives and reading endless telegraph reports. His most dangerous pursuit was the decades-long hunt for the James Younger gang. The Pinkertons flooded Missouri with agents. The reward was millions in corporate contracts. Pinkerton preferred the power of the pen over the gun. His survival skill was his immense wealth, allowing him to fight wars of attrition against outlaw gangs. William orchestrated one of the most controversial raids in history. Frustrated by Jesse James evading capture, William authorized his men to throw an incendiary device into the James family farmhouse in the dead of night. The resulting explosion killed Jesse's young half-brother and blew the arm off his mother. While it caused a massive public scandal, William did not care. It proved to every outlaw in America that the Pinkertons would go to any length to destroy their enemies. He had a unique habit of keeping detailed psychological profiles of every major outlaw in America. Criminals hated the Pinkertons because they never slept and never ran out of money. In his later years, William actively developed early forensic photography and massive fingerprint databases, realizing that the era of horseback manhunters was ending. He frequently traveled to Europe to study advanced criminal investigation techniques at Scotland Yard, bringing those cutting-edge methods back to America. He completely bridged the gap between the chaotic, dusty shootouts of the Wild West and modern federal law enforcement. John X. Baedler. John X. Baedler was a vigilante leader who hunted men in the lawless gold camps of Montana. He became a manhunter because there were no courts to punish murderers. Baedler was secretive, zealous, and totally merciless. He tracked criminals by using a secret society of miners who reported suspicious wealth. His most dangerous pursuit involved hunting down the corrupt sheriff Henry Plummer. Baedler and his vigilantes dragged Plummer and his gang to the gallows in the middle of winter. There was no monetary reward. The reward was survival. He carried a heavy dragoon revolver. His survival skill was absolute secrecy. Baedler was a terrifying figure. Once, after capturing a notorious highwayman, the outlaw begged for a few moments to pray. Baedler coldly agreed, checked his pocket watch, and gave the man exactly 2 minutes. When the time was up, Baedler kicked the box out from under him himself. He treated hangings like standard administrative work. He had a chilling habit of serving as the executioner for the men he hunted. Outlaws were terrified of Baedler because he did not arrest them. He simply hung them in the dead of night. Baedler carried his grim duties with total theatricality. He famously wore a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat, appearing like the Grim Reaper in the snowy Montana camps. Despite his fearsome reputation, he secretly adopted and paid for the education of several orphans whose fathers had been murdered by outlaws, showing a strange hidden morality behind his brutal midnight executions. Baedler died in poverty, entirely unapologetic. Jeff Milton. Jeff Milton was a Texas Ranger, a border guard, and a fiercely independent manhunter. He hunted men because he thrived on absolute danger. Milton was charming, aggressive, and fiercely loyal. He tracked outlaws across the burning deserts of the Southwest by learning the hidden trails used by smugglers. His most dangerous pursuit involved a massive shootout on a train in Arizona. Outlaws tried to dynamite his express car. Milton fought them off with a shattered arm, using a shotgun with one hand. The reward was the railroad's gratitude. He preferred a customized lever-action shotgun. His survival skill was a pain tolerance that bordered on the superhuman. The story of his survival on the train is almost mythical. 5 armed outlaws blasted the train car door open. Milton stepped into the doorway and took a bullet that completely shattered his left arm. Instead of falling, he grabbed his heavy shotgun with his right hand, racked it against his knee, and blew the lead outlaw backward. He then grabbed the keys to the safe and threw them into a pile of luggage before fainting from blood loss. The robbers fled empty-handed. He had a unique habit of never drawing his gun unless he intended to kill. Criminals knew Milton would rather die in a burning train car than surrender. His recovery from the train shootout was a medical miracle. Doctors wanted to amputate his shattered arm, but Milton threatened to shoot any surgeon who brought a saw near him. He tied his arm to a wooden splint himself and miraculously kept the limb. Milton later became the first U.S. immigration border patrolman, riding the desolate Mexican borderline absolutely alone well into his 60s. Kinch McKinney. Kinch McKinney was a relentless manhunter who operated in the treacherous Indian Territory. He hunted men for the bounty money. McKinney was silent, observant, and completely cold-blooded. He tracked criminals by following the distinct tracks of stolen cattle across the prairie grass. His most dangerous pursuit involved hunting heavily armed rustlers into the deep canyons of Oklahoma. He often went alone, realizing a posse made too much noise. The reward was hundreds of dollars per head. He carried a Winchester .4440 rifle. His survival skill was moving through dry brush without making a single sound. McKinney once tracked a group of violent thieves to a cave hideout. Instead of rushing in, McKinney gathered large piles of dry brush and completely blocked the cave entrance. He set the brush on fire, smoking the outlaws out like wild animals. When they finally burst through the smoke, choking and coughing, McKinney had his rifle leveled at their chests. They threw down their weapons immediately. He had a strange habit of waiting until his targets were asleep before moving in for the capture. Criminals were unnerved by McKinney because he struck like a snake in the dark. McKinney also mastered the art of tracking backward. If a gang tried to brush away their footprints, McKinney would simply find where they started and map their likely destination based on water sources. He never rushed. He once spent an entire week living in a hollowed-out tree just to confirm the identities of a rustling ring before systematically taking them all down. Despite a life of violence, he survived the frontier days. Jim Courtright. Jim Courtright was a city marshal who ran an organized protection racket disguised as law enforcement. He hunted men who refused to pay his extortion fees. Courtright was elegant, corrupt, and dangerously fast with a gun. He tracked criminals through his massive network of corrupt saloon owners. His most dangerous pursuits were the violent raids he led into New Mexico to collect bounties. He murdered several men and claimed they resisted arrest. The reward was thousands of dollars in stolen property and bounty money. He carried 2 silver-plated revolvers. His survival skill was his incredible fast draw, considered one of the fastest in Texas. Courtright once tried to extort a wealthy farmer. When the farmer hired guards, Courtright simply gathered a posse of corrupt deputies, rode to the farm in broad daylight, and shot the guards dead under the guise of an official arrest. He then collected a bounty on the dead men. His corruption eventually caught up with him. He had a dangerous habit of intimidating rival lawmen. Outlaws actually paid Courtright to leave them alone. Before his fatal showdown, Courtright actually ran a highly profitable private detective agency, which was entirely a front for his extortion schemes. He would manufacture fake threats against local businesses, only to demand massive fees to protect them. His funeral was one of the largest in Texas history, attended by both the terrified citizens he protected and the criminals he secretly partnered with. He eventually picked a fight with the gambler Luke Short. When Courtright tried to draw his gun, his hammer caught on his watch chain and Short shot him dead in the streets of Fort Worth. Dallas Studenmeyer. Dallas Studenmeyer was a giant, violent lawman hired to tame the deadliest town in Texas. He hunted men because he was a natural killer. Studenmeyer was always angry, heavily armed, and totally fearless. He tracked criminals by walking into their saloons and calling them out by name. His most dangerous pursuit was the famous 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight in El Paso. Studenmeyer shot 3 men in a matter of moments to avenge a murdered friend. The reward was complete control of the city. He carried 2 massive Smith & Wesson revolvers. His survival skill was his terrifying physical presence, able to paralyze men with fear. The famous gunfight in El Paso shows his sheer brutality. A trial was taking place in a local saloon. When shooting suddenly started, Studenmeyer ran into the street. He drew his revolvers and fired at the first man he saw running away. He accidentally shot an innocent bystander. Without missing a beat, he adjusted his aim and blasted the real killer, then shot a second man who drew a gun, and finally blew the brains out of a third man who was hiding behind a post. 4 bodies lay in the dirt in 5 seconds. He had a terrible habit of drinking heavily while on duty. Criminals were completely terrified of his explosive rage. Studenmeyer was so fiercely territorial that he once single-handedly dismantled the corrupt local police force, firing every single deputy in El Paso and patrolling the streets entirely by himself. He would boldly stand in the center of the town square with a shotgun, daring anyone to break the law. Unfortunately, his complete lack of diplomacy and relentless alcoholism ultimately left him without any allies, and he was ambushed and shot to death. Virgil Earp. Virgil Earp was a disciplined city marshal who hunted troublemakers in the boomtowns of the Southwest. He hunted men out of a deep sense of civic duty. Virgil was stoic, highly experienced, and completely unshakable. He tracked criminals by establishing a firm grip on local law enforcement networks. His most dangerous pursuit was facing down the Cowboys gang in Tombstone. He led his brothers into the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. The reward was preserving order in a chaotic silver camp. He carried a Colt revolver and often relied on a double-barreled shotgun. His survival skill was his absolute battlefield composure. During the famous gunfight, Virgil was the only man holding a warrant. He calmly marched down the dusty street toward the heavily armed cowboys and ordered them to throw up their hands. When the shooting started, Virgil took a bullet straight through the calf. He did not fall. He simply switched his weapon to his other hand and kept firing with terrifying precision until the fight was over. He had a habit of taking the most dangerous positions in any fight. Criminals respected Virgil more than his famous brother Wyatt, knowing Virgil would give them a fair chance to surrender. Even with a paralyzed arm from the cowardly ambush and tombstone, Virgil refused to retire. He learned to shoot a revolver perfectly with his non-dominant hand and continued serving as a lawman in Nevada gold camps. He even worked as an undercover railroad detective, proving that true frontier grit wasn't about being invincible, but about refusing to quit no matter how much you bled. He lived a long life. Charles Goodnight. Charles Goodnight was a legendary cattle baron who hunted men to protect his vast empire. He became a manhunter when the law failed to stop massive rustling operations. Goodnight was stern, brilliant, and possessed an iron will. He tracked criminals by financing private possessions and using Native American scouts. His most dangerous pursuit involved tracking Comancheros who were stealing his herds. He followed them hundreds of miles into the desolate Texas panhandle. The reward was saving his cattle empire. He preferred heavy buffalo rifles. His survival skill was his invention of the chuck wagon, allowing his posses to stay fed and supplied for weeks in the desert. Goodnight once caught 3 rustlers stealing his prime cattle. Instead of turning them over to the law, which was hundreds of miles away, Goodnight marched them to a single tree in the middle of the prairie. He threw ropes over the branches himself. He then gave the rustlers the choice to either hang immediately or strip completely naked and walk across the desert. They chose the desert. Goodnight had a unique habit of offering rustlers brutal choices. Criminals realized they could not fight Goodnight's massive resources. Beyond his brutal methods of frontier justice, Goodnight possessed a surprisingly deep respect for the land and its history. He personally negotiated treaties with Comanche leader Quanah Parker to ensure safe passage for his massive cattle drives. He also preserved the last remaining herd of Southern Plains bison on his massive J.A. ranch, saving the species from total extinction while simultaneously ruling his empire with an iron fist. He died incredibly wealthy, remembered as the father of the Texas Panhandle. Henry Brown. Henry Brown was an outlaw who realized hunting men was safer than robbing banks. He became a lawman in Kansas to escape his violent past. Brown was quiet, deadly accurate, and deeply paranoid. He tracked criminals by using his intimate knowledge of how outlaws thought and operated. His most dangerous pursuit involved chasing horse thieves into the treacherous canyon lands. He killed them without hesitation and claimed the bounty. The reward was public praise and steady money. He carried a Winchester rifle that had been given to him by the citizens of Caldwell. His survival skill was his pure killer instinct. Brown's paranoia made him a brilliant hunter. While tracking a group of thieves, he noticed that their campfire smoke was suspiciously thick. Realizing it was a trap, he circled around the ridge and found the thieves waiting in ambush for him. Brown shot them both from behind. He had a dark habit of pacing his office at night, terrified his outlaw past would catch up to him. Outlaws feared him because he fought exactly like they did. Brown's descent back into criminality was shocking precisely because he had been such a highly effective and celebrated marshal. When he and his deputies attempted to rob a bank in Medicine Lodge, Kansas, they were instantly trapped by heavily armed citizens who recognized them. During a desperate escape attempt from the town jail, Brown was blasted with a double-barreled shotgun, instantly ending the tragic dual life of a lawman who could not escape his outlaw nature. Al Sieber. Al Sieber was the chief of scouts for the U.S. Army in the Southwest. He hunted men through the most unforgiving terrain on earth. Sieber was incredibly tough, scared from countless battles, and highly respected. He tracked hostile Apache warriors and violent outlaws by reading the faint scuff marks on solid rock. His most dangerous pursuits involved the bloody Apache Wars. He led posses deep into the burning canyons of Arizona. The reward was military pay and survival. He carried a heavy repeating rifle. His survival skill was entirely adopted from the Apache. He could run for miles in the desert heat without water. During a massive pursuit, Sieber's camp was ambushed in the middle of the night. A bullet shattered his leg. Despite the agonizing pain, Sieber dragged himself to a large rock, grabbed his rifle, and accurately returned fire in total darkness, forcing the attackers to retreat. He had a unique habit of fighting directly alongside his scouts, earning their absolute loyalty. Outlaws and hostiles knew Sieber could not be outrun. Sieber's understanding of Apache culture was so profound that many native leaders considered him an honorable warrior rather than a mere enemy. He played a crucial, often overlooked role in the final surrender of Geronimo, utilizing years of mutual respect to navigate the bitter negotiations. Even after the frontier closed and he was dismissed from military service, the very scouts he commanded continued to visit him, proving his legendary toughness was matched only by his profound integrity. He was killed in a construction accident long after the frontier closed. Harry Love. Harry Love was a brutal former Texas Ranger who hunted men for the massive bounties offered in Gold Rush, California. He was violent, dramatic, and completely ruthless. Love tracked criminals by organizing heavily armed mercenary companies. His most famous pursuit was the hunt for the legendary bandit Joaquin Murrieta. Love chased the gang through the rugged California mountains for weeks. The reward was a massive legislative bounty. Love preferred heavy dragoon revolvers and a saber. His survival skill was raw endurance. He rode his horses to death to catch his prey. The shootout that made him famous was incredibly brutal. Love and his rangers cornered Murrieta's gang at a small campfire. Murrieta tried to mount his horse and escape, but Love chased him down on horseback. A gunfight broke out. Love's men shot Murrieta's horse, throwing him to the ground. Before the bandit could surrender, Love shot him dead. He had a grotesque habit of taking trophies. Love took the bandit's head as a trophy, preserved it to collect the reward, and put it on public display across the mining camps. The public exhibition of the severed head in mining camps across California turned Love into a macabre celebrity, though many skeptics openly whispered that he had simply killed an innocent man to claim the massive state money. The legendary jar was eventually destroyed years later during the massive San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Love never found peace after the Murrieta hunt. His intense paranoia and violent temper led him into a bitter, highly publicized duel with a ranch hand, leaving Love dead in a dusty street. Carrying a severed head in a jar has to be the darkest trophy in Wild West history. Do you think Love actually caught the real Murrieta, or was it all a setup for the bounty money? Let me know your theory below. John Slaughter. John Slaughter was a tough Texas cattleman who became a sheriff in Arizona to crush the rustler gangs. He hunted men with a cold, terrifying efficiency. Slaughter was short, impeccably dressed, and spoke in a low mumble. He tracked criminals by hiring the best scouts and outspending his enemies. His most dangerous pursuit involved tracking the violent Jack Taylor gang into Mexico. He hunted them down one by one, bringing them back dead. The reward was complete dominance of Cochise County. He carried a pearl-handled Colt revolver and a heavy shotgun. His survival skill was his absolute ruthlessness. He did not take prisoners if he could avoid it. Slaughter once tracked a notorious killer to a remote line shack. Instead of calling for surrender, Slaughter crawled onto the roof in the dead of night. He waited by the chimney until morning. When the killer finally stepped out to stretch, Slaughter shot him dead from above. He tossed the body over his horse and rode back into town without saying a word. He had a chilling habit of telling criminals to simply leave town or die. If they stayed, he killed them. Outlaws were terrified of his black, piercing eyes. Slaughter transformed his massive San Bernardino ranch into an impenetrable fortress that straddled the international border, completely cutting off the primary smuggling routes used by desperate bandits. He fiercely protected his land with a privately funded army of heavily armed vaqueros. Even in his old age, suffering from severe health issues, Slaughter would strap on his pearl-handled revolver and ride out to confront rustlers face to face. remaining a terrifying apex predator of the Southwest until the day he died. Frank Hamer. Frank Hamer began his career in the fading days of the Wild West as a horse-riding Texas Ranger. He hunted men because he was a natural apex predator. Hamer was massive, silent, and incredibly dangerous. He tracked criminals by studying their habits, not just their footprints. His most famous pursuit happened later in his life, tracking down Bonnie and Clyde. Hamer hunted them for months across multiple states, mapping out their familial connections. The reward was a massive bounty. He carried a heavy Browning automatic rifle. His survival skill was his patience. He would wait in the brush for days for the perfect ambush. Early in his career, Hamer showed his absolute fearlessness. He was tracking a murderer through a violent border town. The local corrupt sheriff confronted Hamer, telling him to leave. The sheriff drew his gun. Hamer did not even blink. He grabbed the sheriff by the collar, slapped him across the face, took his gun, and walked into the saloon to arrest his target. The entire town watched in stunned silence. He had a unique habit of rarely taking cover during a gunfight. He simply walked toward his enemies and fired. Hamer was not just a relic of the Old West. He perfectly adapted to the motorized era of organized crime. During the hunt for Bonnie and Clyde, he studied their V8 Ford driving patterns and loaded his own vehicle with an absolute arsenal of high-powered automatic weapons and steel-piercing ammunition. Despite his violent reputation, Hamer also stood down dozens of angry lynch mobs throughout his career, putting his own body between furious crowds and his prisoners to uphold the strict letter of the law. He survived over 50 gunfights and died peacefully in his sleep. Wild Bill Hickok. Wild Bill Hickok was a scout, a gambler, and a gunfighter who occasionally hunted men for government pay. He hunted men for the glory and the adrenaline. Hickok was vain, striking, and incredibly fast. He tracked outlaws by utilizing his vast network of frontier informants. His most dangerous pursuits involved his time as Marshal of Abilene. He hunted down rebellious cowboys who tried to destroy his town. The reward was high pay and complete control of the gambling halls. He famously carried 2 silver-plated Colt Navy revolvers tucked into a red sash. His survival skill was his legendary fast draw. Hickok's legendary status was sealed when a cowboy named Phil Coe fired a shot in the street. Hickok ran out to stop him. Coe quickly aimed his pistol at the marshal. In a fraction of a second, Hickok drew both his revolvers and shot Coe in the stomach. Tragically, a shadow moved behind Coe. Hickok reacted instantly, firing again, only to realize he had accidentally killed his own deputy. The heartbreak haunted him forever. He had a strange habit of walking down the exact center of the street to avoid alleyway ambushes. Outlaws were terrified of his reputation. In his final years, Hickok was secretly going blind from glaucoma, a terrifying reality for a man who relied entirely on his vision to survive daily assassination attempts. He tried to supplement his fading income by joining Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, but he despised the fake theatricality and frequently shot blanks dangerously close to the actor's legs out of spite. His tragic murder in Deadwood, holding the infamous dead man's hand of aces and eights, permanently cemented his immortal status as the ultimate tragic gunfighter. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp was a professional lawman who hunted men to protect his family's interests. He hunted men because he believed in absolute loyalty. Earp was calculating, fearless, and possessed a deadly calm. He tracked criminals by outsmarting them using legal warrants and relentless pressure. His most dangerous pursuit was the legendary Earp Vendetta ride. After his brothers were ambushed, Earp hunted down the Cowboys gang across the Arizona desert. The reward was personal vengeance. He carried a long-barreled buntline special revolver. His survival skill was an uncanny ability to stand completely still while bullets flew around him. The shootout at Iron Springs defines his legend. Wyatt and his posse blundered into an ambush set by the deadly cowboy Curly Bill Brocious. The posse scattered, but Wyatt stood completely still in the open dirt. Curly Bill fired and missed. Wyatt calmly raised his shotgun and practically cut Curly Bill in half. Despite being shot at by multiple cowboys from cover, Wyatt remounted his horse and rode away without a single scratch. He had a unique habit of pistol whipping men rather than shooting them when possible. Criminals were terrified of his icy demeanor. What truly set Wyatt Earp apart from his doomed contemporaries was his extraordinary ability to survive long enough to see his own legend romanticized on the silver screen. In his twilight years in Los Angeles, Earp actually worked as an unpaid consultant for early Hollywood directors, teaching young silent film actors like John Wayne how real gunfighters drew their weapons and held their posture. He lived long enough to watch the brutal reality of his youth transform into classic American mythology. Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves was born a slave and became the most successful bounty hunter and deputy marshal in American history. He hunted men because he believed deeply in the law. Reeves was towering, incredibly strong, and a master of disguise. He tracked criminals by disappearing into the landscape. He could read the trail of a man across solid rock. His most dangerous pursuit involved tracking 2 murderers into the treacherous Red River Valley. Reeves disguised himself as a wandering tramp, walking for miles with holes in his shoes. He tricked the killers into inviting him into their cabin and arrested them both at gunpoint while they slept. The reward was standard federal pay. He carried 2 heavy Colt revolvers and a Winchester rifle. His survival skill was his brilliant mind and unmatched physical endurance. One of his most incredible stories involves a shootout where his hat was blown clean off his head. Reeves calmly told the outlaw that he had ruined a perfectly good hat. When the outlaw paused, confused by the strange complaint, Reeves drew his weapon and shot the man dead. He had a unique habit of singing softly to himself before a gunfight. Criminals were utterly terrified of Bass Reeves. Amazingly, despite being completely illiterate, Reeves never once arrested the wrong man. He memorized massive stacks of legal warrants by having them read out loud to him just once, recognizing the shapes of the words and reciting the exact charges from pure memory. When Oklahoma achieved statehood and the federal marshals were disbanded, the aging Reeves simply took a job as a city policeman in Muskogee. He walked a daily beat with a cane and a revolver, an unstoppable force of justice until his dying breath. He was the undisputed king of the frontier manhunters.